Hello everyone, and welcome to our first out of 4 webinars on planning and forecasting excellence. Let's just give it just 1 more minute for the last people to join in, and then we'll start. All right, I think we can get started. So again, hello and welcome. I'm Ang Shang and I'll be your moderator today. We are very excited to host these webinars, each of them targeting a different aspect on how data and technology can and will impact the way that we do our planning and forecasting. Now, before we get started, I would just like to introduce a few features of the console that you're viewing. On the left-hand side, you see the Q&A. If you're experiencing any technical issues, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to write them to us here, and we'll be happy to address these towards the end of the webinar. In the middle, you have your screen, which you can minimize and maximize using the buttons at the top right corner. And on the right-hand side, you see our speakers for the day. In the bottom, you also have a menu bar where you can open and hide windows. So in case something goes missing for you, you can probably open it again from there. I would also like to inform you that this webinar will be recorded and materials will be sent afterwards. So please feel free to share this with your colleagues, especially the ones that could not make it today. All right, so let's move on to the topic of today, strategic predictive planning, fiction or reality. We would like to challenge the way that we do our planning, budgeting, and forecasting processes today. Maybe the main thing you're still using are Excels, maybe lots of them that you consolidate. Maybe gut feeling still plays a big role. But nowadays, technology is embedded in our daily lives. In fact, every single minute, we are generating 2.3 billion gigabytes of data. So what are we waiting for? Let's start leveraging this data. So during this next hour together, we'll talk a bit about the power of predictive analytics, the key ingredients, how to take the first steps, and we'll present Trendex, which is a Deloitte solution to help you get started. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves here, let's introduce panel speakers of today. Let's start with you, Nick van de Zijp. Nick, you are one of our subject matter experts in this field and currently writing a doctorate about the value of data-driven forecast. I've been told that you have a quote to share with us today.
Hi, good afternoon, Ang. Yes, that's true. The quote which I would like to use to introduce myself is, "Luck is when opportunity meets preparation." We, in digital transformation, I believe we don't need to wait until something happens and then attribute that to luck. I really believe that we will be lucky and we will yield success when we are prepared, right? When opportunity meets preparation. Those will be the lucky ones.
All right, thank you very much, Nick. And next to Nick, we have Marcus Dorn, the Finance and Performance Lead here at Deloitte, Switzerland, with over 20 years of experience in finance transformations. And Marcus, what is your connection to today's topic?
Hi, Ang. My connection to predictive analytics is actually the interest and the needs of our clients. I do finance transformation projects for quite some years. And for the past 2 to 3 years, the focus of finance transformation shifted quite substantially from purely looking at efficiency gains to also, or even primarily, looking at gains in insights. That's the point when we start introducing predictive analytics to our clients and the ecosystems around it. And I'm therefore very proud to welcome our special guest for today's webinar, Rich Wagner, Chief Executive Officer and founder of one of Deloitte's global alliance partners, Previdere, a leading company in generating industry insights and predictive analytics. Rich, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Marcus. And I'm glad to be here. I'm Rich Wagner, as Marcus said, founder and CEO of Previdere. If I had a quote that would kind of describe what we do in our company, it's one that's called, "The past cannot be changed. The future is yet in your power." That's really what we do and why we were started, and I'll explain that in more detail during the webinar. But we help companies leverage this data and information to become more predictive.
All right, thank you both very much, Marcus and Rich. We're happy that you're here with us today. And for everyone listening in, when you registered, you submitted a few details like your job role and the company that you work for. So we took the liberty to use this data and prepare an overview to present the audience, which you should be able to see on your screen now. So as you see, we have a pretty nice background with us here today, and there's a good level of understanding for planning and forecasting. If, however, you have any questions throughout this webinar regarding some terms, concepts, something else that we're using which is not fully clear to you, again, please feel free to use the Q&A box. So now that we've gotten to know each other a little, let's start with the first topic of today, the power of predictive analytics. And to start, I would like to ask everyone in the audience, is predictive analytics currently on the agenda at your company? And here on your screen, you should be able to see a poll. And the poll you can answer yes, no, don't know. And by on the agenda, we're thinking that it should be some kind of interest from finance management to look into, or perhaps even seriously thinking about investing in predictive analytics. And here I would just like to stress that it's really about predictive analytics and not other kind of analytics. So let's give it a few seconds while we're waiting for the results to tick in. All right, I think they're ticking in now, so let's reveal them to the audience. So Marcus, when you're looking at this, is this something that you see at clients, or do you see a different number in your head?
Yes, this is pretty much what I see with clients. What we see is, and what this graph nicely shows, is there's a lot of awareness and appetite in the market for predictive analytics. But what we also see is that the degree of deployment is rather low compared to the degree of the appetite. And we think there are several reasons for this gap between appetite and degree of deployment. One factor is, in most situations, when we talk about technology in finance, it's about the technology that helps us do things we do already in finance in a more automated way, in a more efficient way. But with predictive analytics, it's mostly new technologies to help us things that we don't do yet or didn't do before. And this is maybe that causes a little bit of a hesitation in the first step to really get going with predictive analytics. And that's actually also a driver why we do this webinar series, to raise awareness and really showcase and talk about the power of predictive analytics.
All right, because when I look at this, I definitely see that there's a lot of interest out there. So maybe now would be a good time for us to take a step back and answer the question, what is predictive analytics? And Nick, I know you're teaching this topic at various universities. Can you explain to us what predictive analytics is about and what it actually means?
Sure, Ang. This is a course of 2 hours to introduce predictive analytics, but let me try to reduce this in 2 minutes. The essentials. Actually, predictive analytics uses a variety of statistical techniques which are consuming somehow data, which are using somehow data to predict and to give an answer of something which we don't know yet with a given certainty, never with 100% certainty, but with a given certainty. In our case, where we are speaking about planning and forecasting, the answer where we want to get, the question where we want to get an answer on is, of course, what the outlook is for the coming months, how the numbers for our business for the coming months will look like. If you bring it back, actually, predictive analytics helps us understanding three main things. It leverages data to understand the direction of the organizational performance. What's the trend? What's the seasonality? What's the cyclicity factor which we are encountering, which we need to understand? Secondly, it's about understanding relationships. Especially in this case, we start adding and augmenting additional sources of data to our predictive engine. It could be internal or external. We will speak about that later in the webinar, but we are adding and augmenting different data factors and try to understand the relationship between our business performances and those additional data sources. And the third reason, or the third way how predictive analytics helps us, is understanding the impact of certain events. Something which happened in the past and where we know what the impact on business performance was, can help us also in the future to understand if a certain event will occur again, what the impact will be on our business performances. That's, I believe, the essential way it's really about.
Thank you very much for explaining that, Nick. So I think it's very good that we now have a common understanding of what we mean when we're talking about predictive analytics. And now that we know what it is, let's move on to what it can actually do. And here, again, we're very happy to have you, Rich, with us today. As mentioned earlier, you founded Prevadaire. So maybe now you can tell us a little bit about the idea behind it and where exactly your company brings value to clients using predictive analytics.
Yeah, thanks, Ang. And this is really relevant to today's topic. First, I'd like to describe the name Prevadaire. Prevadaire is actually an Italian verb that means to forecast or to foresee. And that's really what we do for companies. But how it came about and the idea behind this was from my experience working for about 14 years in a Fortune 500 global manufacturing company. I ran IT, I led all the systems and applications, I presented reports to our business, and I realized executives within the company rarely looked at our business intelligence reports and dashboards. And it led me to ask a simple question to our CFO. And what that question was is, what information are we missing? Why is it that leaders in the company rarely look at business intelligence? What kind of information can I bring that would get them to use that information more frequently? What our CFO said led to Prevadaire back in 2011 was that all the internal data in our business intelligence reports was historical in nature, and they couldn't change it. He said, what we need are the leading external drivers of this now very diverse global chemical company that we were leading and building. And when he said that, it made me research and think about really what information we're providing and how businesses needed information. Large companies like ours, well, they ebb and flow with external factors, even more so than our internal. So no matter what we did with pricing and promotion, if there was no demand from consumers or from different downstream industries for our products, it really wouldn't matter. And we weren't bringing in or providing any of that external data. We were making decisions based just on internal historical data. So that was the idea behind Prevadaire. Once I built it and we started bringing in external factors into our forecast and planning process, we could immediately see that not only did we understand our business better and gain new insights, but we could actually predict it several periods in advance much more accurately, which led to more confident and more accurate decisions.
Thank you very much, Rich. So you mentioned a little bit of accuracy, and this is definitely also something that's on my mind when I think about data and predictive analytics. Nick, would you mind elaborating a little bit on this? Does accuracy play a big role when we start using these models, or not so much?
Yeah, and I think you're mentioning one of the most important words indeed, accuracy. I think the most frequent asked questions by clients to me is, great, Nick, but predictive analytics, how accurate will it be for us? What if we implement a predictive engine? How accurate will that be for us? And unfortunately, that's a very hard question to answer until you've really tried it. But the message which I really try to bring across to clients mind is not too much looking at accuracy in absolute value. 90% accuracy, is that good or bad? What if we look at it from a different angle? What if we say, well, actually, that predictive engine, where, by the way, we don't need to spend any effort on it, right? It's an effortless exercise, no human interaction. What if that predictive engine leveraging data is 90% accurate, but actually it's 5% more accurate than what we had before with our predictive engine? Isn't that a better metric? Isn't it better to look at accuracy as a forecast value add to see how much a predictive engine can add on top of accuracy? And I try to even take it one step further in that discussion with regards to accuracy. I believe that by implementing or looking at predictive analytics, of course, you can gain accuracy by implementing predictive analytics, but the time that you save by using predictive analytics and not having humans spending time on baseline forecast, what if you reallocate that time towards the difficult cases, the ambiguous cases, the hyper-growth products, the typical areas where predictive engines are not that good in? And what if you really start looking at AI as augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence? I believe that you can even increase your accuracy even more by that.
So Nick, from what I understand, is that we should rather think about accuracy in a relative form instead of absolute.
Yeah, absolutely, Ang.
Is that
absolutely.
Right? Okay, so we've established that accuracy is definitely something that people put a lot of thoughts into when we talk about this topic. But I'm wondering, what are other reasons besides accuracy to use as good arguments for going predictive? Marcus, do you have something to add on this one?
Yes, so when I talk to CFOs and finance teams who are involved in planning or forecasting, the three major points they want to improve on are: number one, efficiency; number two, creating better insights; and three, creating insights faster. When we take the example of forecasting, when we use predictive analytics to create the forecast, we expect a more timely availability of the forecast figures because it reduces the effort of bottom-up collection of figures in many areas. So it's accuracy, increased accuracy of the forecast is definitely one example, but it does also help substantially reduce the effort for collecting the figures, and forecasts or other insights are available way earlier than through traditional methodologies.
All right, I think those are three very attractive points. So building on what Marcus just said, Rich, maybe you can give us some real-life examples which really highlights the power of predictive analytics.
Yeah, thanks. I certainly can. So I'll give you two examples, and one of them starts with a good story. A leading U.S. cosmetic retailer was growing double-digit growth year over year for several years and was getting ready to do their upcoming annual plan. Well, based on their historical value and kind of the internal bias toward that growth, they once again projected about a 20% year-over-year growth. Once we took a look at their actual business and identified leading indicators that were driving growth for this business, we noticed some things. First, some demographic data on their consumer. Their consumer was typically an 18 to 35-year-old female that had a household income of less than 50K. Well, what we noticed is that demographic was actually experiencing some pressure from consumer pricing and a lag or a flat real average hourly earnings growth, meaning that although prices were going up for the things that they needed to buy, their actual wages were not. And that was a signal to us that maybe this company wasn't going to experience 20% year-over-year growth. We also identified some other signals that consumers were starting to shop in drugstores and convenience stores for cosmetics, not just cosmetic stores. And we saw a trend toward online purchasing through our data. What this did was provided a different picture, really a fact-based and more of an unbiased lens on the upcoming year. And we noticed that, no, it wasn't actually going to be a 20% year-over-year growth year, that most likely it would be about half that. And that's certainly what happened with this organization based on the leading factors. However, now the CEO and CFO was armed with a different perspective or lens that they were prepared for this slowing of growth, although their internal team thought they were going to continue growing. So think of that as risk reduction so they can take action, adjust pricing, maybe invest more online so they can take advantage of this market change as opposed to just being affected by it. Well, that's one example. Another example, which is very common, is around inventory optimization and inventory reduction. A leading adult beverage manufacturer came to us and had already done the math. They said if we actually can improve our forecast accuracy by our different distribution centers by 3%, we could save $9 million in excess inventory. Well, we took a look at regional factors, consumer behavior, certainly economic conditions, pricing in the region, consumer preference and sentiment data, and not only could we get 3% more accurate, but in this case, we improved their forecast accuracy by about 18%, which allowed them to adjust inventory and reduce excess and obsolete. So the hard dollar savings example is very familiar. We do that, but also you can't ignore the risk reduction as in the case of that first example.
Thank you for those examples, Rich. So hearing those makes me think that by using predictive analytics, you can actually connect some dots which would otherwise be rather hard to connect.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We were talking about specific consumers, specific behavior, wages for certain households. All those things are signals that are out there and available. But a typical day in a finance, planning, and analytics team really isn't aware of where to go get those, how they can use them, what's available to them. So it's about having a repository of data and having a purpose-built application that can help you identify those insights.
Great. So now that we've discussed what predictive analytics is and what it can do and presented some real cases, I'm feeling rather excited. So I'm thinking if someone listening to this right now feels the same, they might be wondering what are the key ingredients that companies need to really start becoming predictive. So we mentioned data, so that's definitely somewhere to start, right? And Marcus, I'm thinking let's take it step by step. Are companies able to generate value in their planning and forecasting activities just by using internal data, so data that they already have in their own systems?
Absolutely, yes, Ang. So actually this is where most of the clients start with using the internal data that's already available and easily accessible. And I used to share quite a nice client example, which I like a lot because it explains and highlights the power of internal data. And one doesn't always need IBM Watson to become predictive. There was this one client who had a typical usual finance procedure, reporting to the CFO on a monthly basis the figures, and one day they found a pretty downturn in the revenue in a specific area in Switzerland. And the typical process started of questioning why is this going on. The team went back, deep dive analysis, and after a few days they found this is because one of the key salespeople resigned 6 months ago, and he took a few clients with him, and this is what they saw now in the figures in this region. And then we started changing things and said, listen, if we only would combine HR data with finance data to create some insights, similar to the examples that Rich explained a few minutes ago with external data, then we would have found by looking or including HR data into our reporting that a key person has resigned. There's a 6-month notice period, so we now have 6 months to identify mitigation actions. And all of a sudden we would be predictive in this area and at least have leading indication about what will happen with the business. And I think that's a very good example how powerful already internal data can be. And this can be a series of data of one specific element, or as I explained in my example, combining various sets of data that are available within the company.
So from the client example that you just mentioned, Marcus, it almost seems to me like these models can act a bit like a communication tool, a platform between different business units and departments. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes.
All right. Also, it seems like you can get pretty far with just your own internal data. So, Rich, I think you would be the best one to answer my next question then. What is the extra value added of combining external data with what you already have?
Yeah, and Ang, I'd look at this as kind of a similar to driving a car and just looking out the back window, right? If we do that, if we look at just what we've been through, the history of where we've been, we'll never see oncoming traffic. That's very true with external data. So what external data does is it actually can identify upcoming changes that you wouldn't normally see. If your business is trending in one direction or the other, you're going to assume that it's going to continue to trend that way. But if you can actually look and you can see markets are changing, consumer behavior is changing, you may see a business cycle change months, sometimes years in advance, that just looking internal you would never see. So with external data, we get a lens on changing behaviors, changing economy, changing climate, and we can actually quantify how and when that's going to impact our business. So hopefully that helps or answers your question.
That answers half of it, because now I have a follow-up question. How and where do you get access to all this data?
Yeah, that's becoming one, more possible and more available. Data is. So data is all around us. As everybody knows, it's growing exponentially. Today, you need to look at multiple sources, and it's almost as important that you get the right category of data, let alone the right actual data indicator. So we want to look at things like economic conditions, certainly, consumer behavior, financial data, weather, because climate's impacting most of our industries. So this variety of data is very important in this category, but we're also starting to see new data, online activity from consumers, IoT data from connected devices. We may see something like smart appliances coming online in certain neighborhoods and know that that's a healthy neighborhood for a store placement. So data is all around us. There's more of it. The problem is there's so much of it, it can just be noise unless you have the right knowledge of how to identify what's really relevant for your business.
All right, so talking about this data, I'm thinking that you can usually only get to this once something has happened, right? It's all past. So what about companies where there's very little past data, or if the past doesn't say much about the future? I'm thinking, for instance, a pharma company launching a brand new product. Does predictive analytics still work for them? Nick?
Yeah, and good question, actually. We think that you need a very stable, very complete data set with years of history before you can get started with predictive analytics, but that's definitely not the case. It links back to what I've explained before about forecast value added. Everywhere where a predictive engine can add something, actually it does make sense to start looking into predictive analytics. From the experience which I have, most of the time predictive analytics does bring additional accuracy. I can share a quite nice example from a pharma company where we've been working with last year. They are spending quite some time on planning, budgeting, forecasting, and they've missed last year revenue with about $1 billion, which was quite a bit for them. They came to us and they asked, look, we have quite some data. We're buying data from external data sources. We have access to many different free external data sources. Can't we do anything which improves our accuracy with predictive analytics? Some people were skeptic in the organization, saying probably for a pharma company this will be very difficult because we have a new launch of products, we have lots of exclusivity, our products are very complex, they're sold in different indications, different treatment lines. In the end, we brought the whole team together for 2 days, and we've been searching together with them if there was a value for predictive analytics. And together with their data science team, with their business intelligence, the forecasting team, and the financial team, we've, in a hackathon setting, we've been searching for the best predictive algorithm, and cool thing, 4 out of 5 of our models of the brands were more accurate with predictive analytics than the human forecast, which was before. So yes, also in situations where data does not look that stable or where some data is missing, where the history is not that long, predictive analytics can yield success.
So Nick, just to be sure I got that right, the models that you built were able to outperform human predictions in almost all of the cases?
Yes, exactly, that's true.
And you can get this kind of accuracy without any interaction from a human person. Is this correct too?
Yes, that's correct too, although the real value of predictive analytics lies into the combination of humans and machines, where humans can augment the predictive engine and can really bring the value where the predictive engine is not good in.
Okay, so having talked now about the power of predictive analytics and the key ingredients, it sounds very convincing to me, and also it seems that you actually don't need that much to get started. So I'm sitting here and wondering, why is it not already adopted by all companies out there? Maybe this is a good time for a second poll where we will ask you in the audience if you have already adopted predictive today. And if not, then what is holding you back? And on your screen now or in a few seconds, you should be able to see the poll, and feel free to tick all that applies. So what you see on the screen are some of the most common hurdles that we hear from our clients. If you do have any others in mind that you don't see here, please feel free to write us in the Q&A and we'll be happy to address those as well. So while our audience is answering, Marcus, do you have anything to add to our questions here?
Yes, while the audience is voting, what we typically see is basically two groups of companies. There's the group that has not seen the full value yet of predictive analytics and therefore is a bit hesitant. The other group do see the power of predictive analytics, but they have other internal hurdles that prevents them from getting started immediately. This can be projects with conflicting requests to resources, could be budget hurdles, any other hurdles, but the trust in predictive analytics is already there.
All right, thank you, Marcus. So the results are just ticking in right now, and you see them here on the screen. Rich, I would like to ask you, is there anything that's surprising to you here? Any other hurdles that you often see out there which we didn't cover here?
And no, and the results here don't surprise me. We do hear that from our customers or potential customers. You know, the overall, I think the value of predictive analytics needs to come in and be really done through what we call a proof of value or proof of concept, so that we can actually take a look and say, well, how much will predictive analytics help us, and explain to us how we would consume or use that in our ongoing process. That's a very common question that we see from our customers or hear from our customers. It's one that's easily addressed with working with our customers and taking a look first at a small subset of data and then showing them exactly how they would use it, and then also laying out business use cases. So I think the results don't surprise me. I think the hardest step overall is first just to decide to do it, right? We get comfortable in our day jobs and our companies, and we also kind of the definition of crazy. We continue to do the same things that we always have done in the past, but we expect different results. We expect our forecast to improve, our ability to forecast, but we're really not changing anything. So I think the hardest step and the biggest is just to decide, yes, we want to improve this. And then once you do that, we can work with companies, and Deloitte can work with companies to say, okay, let's scope out really where and how you would use this.
All right, thank you, Rich. That's quite interesting to hear. And Nick, I'm just wondering now from Deloitte side as well, do you resonate with the answers as well? And how do we help clients and companies take the first step? What journey can we really take them on?
Yeah, and I was not surprised to see the answers either. What you actually do see that quite some of the companies see the value of predictive analytics, but that the main hurdle is on how to get started with it. In the end, it's a quite complex matter. What we did at Deloitte, we've created Trendex. We wanted to lower the barrier of entry in predictive analytics and really demystify this topic in the market. And there Trendex is helping. How can you see Trendex? Actually, it's the customizable solution that really accelerates the journey into predictive forecasting. In 1 second, what is it about? It's a toolbox with different ready-to-use building blocks that we can implement easily. And those building blocks, there are 3 of them. First of all, we are talking about planning applications. Predictive analytics only become insightful and only generate value when you really start embedding them into your monthly, daily, weekly, yearly forecasting process. So these planning applications are very important. The second building block which Trendex is using are master algorithms. Actually, algorithms which just identify the best fitting forecasting technique for your company specific dataset at a certain granularity. And the third building block is the external data, right? Where we try to connect with as many as possible external data factors and really try to leverage on them. The nice thing of Trendex, I believe, is that our clients can pick and choose those different modules which they need, which will bring value to them, and we can also tailor them towards their existing processes. To do all of that, Trendex is built on leading technology solutions like Prevadair. That's also the reason why we are building an alliance with Prevadair, and where that's a very important solution for us.
So Nick, if I get this right, basically the idea with Trendex is to take this rather abstract idea of predictive analytics and make it into small, easily digestible bites for companies to pick and choose from based on their own needs.
Yes, exactly. And we really try to increase the return on investment and the time to value with Trendex.
And I'm wondering, so in practice, how do we go about this when a company or a client comes to us and expresses interest for Trendex? Marcus, what do we do in practice?
In practice, this means Trendex offers many ways for our clients to test the waters before making a big commitment. Most of the time before we start a full rollout, we spend just a couple of days or at most a few weeks to build a proof of concept jointly with our clients to assess their predictability potential. And the result, a prototype typically, gives a real experience on what a solution could look like and how it works. In parallel, we calculate the business case and the return on investment. It's also the perfect way to really prove the value and get buy-in from the management.
Exactly, Marcus. And if I may add one thing on top of those 2 things which we're doing with Trendex, next to the predictability assessment and next to the proof of value, we're also hosting quite often predictive analytics labs with our clients, which is something very interesting to bring different stakeholders in the organization together with our experts to really assess what the impact and what the value of predictive analytics is within a certain organization.
So it sounds to me like Trendex offers something for every company, no matter what stage of the journey they are currently in. And Nick and Marcus, I know that you both have an answer to my next question, but I would really like to address this to Rich. Rich, what are your thoughts on the return on investment on Trendex or generally in predictive analytics? Is it really worth the investment?
Yes, thanks, Ang. And the return on investment can happen almost immediately, but it's across the organization. It's in everything from top-line revenue growth by identifying upcoming market opportunity, maybe ahead of competitors. It can be risk reduction, seeing a declining market and maybe exiting a declining market sooner, setting the right price, setting and investing in the right promotions when you need to augment a certain market because of economic decline. It's also the hard dollar savings that come with buying and procuring raw material, building products, staffing, shipping, logistics. So ROI comes from many areas. The one thing I usually say is, let's start at the top. Your CEO and CFO of your organization, they make very important and strategic and very costly decisions for the organization. Well, what if with predictive analytics, they just made one decision better or more accurate? In many cases, this can be worth hundreds of millions, or sometimes even larger, billions of dollar decisions they make. So getting predictive in their hand is an immediate return on investment with more confidence, more accuracy in the decisions, all the way down to the very tactical. Let's get operational, and maybe we see that we have a decline for a certain product in a certain market, and we don't need to buy as much raw material. We can reduce inventory. Maybe we actually don't need to bring online a new manufacturing plant this year. It could be next year. So the ROI is usually very large, very easy to calculate across functions, and will pay for itself in sometimes days or weeks of implementing a predictive analytics project.
All right, well, you definitely convinced me, Rick. I am fully on board. But now when I reflect a little bit on our discussions here this afternoon, what really interests me is what the future of predictive analytics will look like in, let's say, 5 years' time. Already now, it sounds pretty advanced to me, but what is the future? And Rich, I would again be really keen to hear this from you. Being the CEO of a company, working with this topic on a daily basis, what are your thoughts on this? Where are we headed? And really, what is your vision?
Yeah, so specifically for the finance function and decision makers within companies, the future is really about consuming and using data, no matter whether it's inside your company or outside your four walls. So we're going to have access to all the information we need, all the data we need through systems and through analytics tools to make better decisions. The other, as we start to get more confident in these predictive solutions and predictive technology, we're going to start to allow it to make decisions for us. Instead of notifying someone a price change is needed, what if the system actually made that change? The other thing that we see happening is the routine and mundane task that we do today will be eliminated by automation and machine learning and predictive, where we may see people by hand trying to close the books every month or every quarter. Well, that routine task of doing that, maybe a routine task of hunting and gathering data to use in your forecasting process, well, that will be automated. And you can see that coming even in things like cars, right? We're having cars that are becoming more automated. We're starting to trust them more. They're parking themselves first. Next, they'll be driving themselves down the highway without our intervention at all. Same thing's happening inside organization. That routine and mundane task is going to go to the way of things that we trust that can make faster, maybe more efficient decisions than we can as a human.
All right, thanks for sharing your insights and your, prediction with us. And now we have, a little under 15 minutes left, so I think we should move on to our questions. They've been ticking in throughout the webinar. So let me start with the first one, and this one goes to you, Nick. Does predictive analytics reduce the cost of a finance organization?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I believe you can look at different ways to this question. If you look at purely from efficiency or from efficient perspective, actually it does, because you're reducing the time you spend on forecast. So actually, yes, you could say it reduces the cost. At the same time, what if you reinvest that time into making even better plans, right? As I explained before, what if you use the time which is left to really look at the more ambiguous cases and actually reinvest that time into what humans are really good in? I believe it's more looking at reinvesting time than really trying to save time by predictive analytics. It's by generating more insights and not doing it faster as well.
Thank you for that answer, Nick. Next question goes to Marcus. do you need to change the talent in the finance organization?
We believe so that there needs to be new skills in finance in order to deal with these technologies, to really make the models that you use in predictive analytics more and more sophisticated. Skills that know how to connect data, how to read data, how to combine data. There's terms like R or Python as a programming language. We see this in our teams at Deloitte, and we see that the client teams, that there's now finance organizations looking at those skills to be embedded in the finance organization. So I wouldn't say changing the skills in finance, but definitely adding elements of these skills into the finance organization.
All right, yeah, that makes sense to me. The next question we have, I think Rich would be the right one to answer this. It goes, what's the typical level of granularity you work on?
Yeah, the granularity will depend on the company and the products that or services that they make and sell. We can, and in many cases, will work on very specific SKU level data for customers and things that have been around for 3 to 5 years that we use every day. We may see something like fast food restaurants and forecast beverage sales and pizza by store and maybe by brand of beverage. We also see manufacturing companies that make industrial products or chemicals that it's pretty easy for us to have good quality history of those products going out in the market to where we can forecast a very granular level. All that's great, but to me, it's not the right place to start. You can kind of see you can't see the forest for the trees, for example, in that if you work on a very low-level SKU, well, how much impact does that have to the business? Whereas if you go in and you say, I'm going to help this business unit president and this finance team by one of the major business units understand the overall market for their products and services and make a more accurate plan for the future, well, that's going to impact more of the business. It's also going to generate a very high ROI or return from that initiative versus a very granular product or SKU. Whereas we're going to look at a major business unit, a major product category, a major brand, and a major region. Well, that ROI can then fund and can enable us to get more granular later, where we've understood what the core drivers of that product family, that product category, that business unit. Then we can apply those to get more granular to the products and the packaging that goes into them.
All right, I think that explains it very well. Thank you very much, Rich. We have another question here, which I think is quite relevant, and maybe for you, Nick. How do you typically embed predictive analytics in an organization so it becomes part of the routines instead of a one-time exercise?
Yeah, we at Deloitte do quite some surveys, and last year we did one on how the finance organization will look like in 2025. And 8 big points came out of that. And one of them was actually, in planning, budgeting, forecasting, the typical planning cycles, which we know today, right? The monthly forecast, the rolling forecast, the yearly budget, these kind of things will disappear in the future. Will disappear in the future. In these cases, predictive analytics are, of course, really helping. And that's a really good start to get started with predictive analytics, I believe. The value of predictive analytics is that you're interacting with data on an almost in-memory base, real-time base. You're connecting with those different data sources, which are changing every single day, and you can drag in that information on a daily basis. The idea is really to look at forecasting more as a daily exercise, looking at the future rather than as a monthly cycle.
All right, thank you, Nick. And I think we have time for one last question, and this is one of the best ones. And it goes, how much does it cost to get started with Trendex? Marcus, would you like to enlighten us?
Sure. So That's a very frequent question, obviously, that many clients are interested in. How much does it cost to get started? And we say there's no fixed cost associated, that you need to have a minimum amount of investment to get started. What it typically means to get started is a few weeks engagement. It's a low-touch engagement with very little disruption from the business or the finance teams, and it's low cost. As we mentioned earlier, and we've explained, a few days proof of concept, and then add another few weeks for making something in a production system. So we talk about a 3 to 4 weeks engagement to build simple models. Some examples that Rich explained, and I'm happy for Rich to add on my question, add on my response. So back to your question, it's think of a 3 to 4 weeks low touch and low cost engagement.
Yeah, and Marcus,
Okay.
That's our experience as well. You know, what we do is we typically will go in and ask a company, you know, for 3 to 5 things that they care about, 3 to 5 areas of the business that we can take a look at here at Prevadere or with the Deloitte team, and we can analyze for you that'll actually resonate with decision makers as we bring back the answers and the insights. And to do that is pretty cost effective, right? It's not a very large project. And time-wise, it's not high effort. It's just a little bit of data history from the team at your company, and then we'll go off, do the work. We'll come back once or twice and then present the findings. We get started in that way so that we can build the business case, build the ROI, and build the roadmap of predictive analytics for your organization. And that's really a very quick and a low-cost way to get started.
All right. So I think with that last question, I would like to conclude the questions and answers. And Marcus, Rich, and Nick, thank you very much for sharing your insights and your knowledge with us. So coming back to our overall topic of this webinar, predictive strategic planning. Nick, is it fiction or reality? What do you think?
Definitely reality, absolutely.
All right. And Marcus, what are your thoughts?
Definitely reality, and I hope that this webinar is one contribution to bring this to life, because we do think and see that when people are less familiar with predictive analytics yet, it can easily put into the fiction corner, but it's definitely reality.
And last but not least, Rich, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely a reality. You know, we work with lots of leading companies all over the globe, across industries that are leveraging it today. What will be in the very near future is we'll be looking back and saying, I can't believe that we weren't using predictive analytics and external data in our forecasting and planning process. It'll be just unheard of very soon. And it's really a trend that we've seen over the last probably 18, 24 months. And now almost every company has a plan to and a need to introduce predictive into their forecasting process, as well as leveraging external signals about where their business is heading.
All right, thank you. So around the table, I think we're in very broad agreement that it's definitely reality, and I agree myself as well. So I'm thinking, how do we take this further? And if you out there listening are thinking the same, then please join us next month on the 12th of March, where we will meet again to discuss our webinar number 2 about the importance of connected planning and how to incorporate different plans together in an organization. So thank you everyone on the line for spending this hour with us, listening and interacting. We hope that it's been very interesting to you. It definitely has been for us. And if you have any questions that we didn't manage to answer here, or if anything suddenly pops up, please always feel free to reach out to us. We would love to continue this discussion with you. So again, thank you very much, Marcus, Rich, and Nick, and everyone on the line. And have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ang.